Well, something that's become common practice in our house over these last couple of years is when there's a long period of time in which there's no school for our children and the world is quiet, we have to negotiate finding some sort of a series or some series of movies on TV that fit the likings of a 6-year-old and some 40-something adults. And so last week, my family landed on a series by National Geographic called Welcome to Earth. The 6-year-old loves it because it is filled with exotic animals from parts of the world that we'll probably never see. The 40-year-olds love it because the videography is amazing. The pictures are beautiful. And because Will Smith, the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, is the narrator. And so we're taken right back to the 90s and to our own childhood. Episode 3 is titled Mind the Swarm. It was our favorite, and in fact, Carrie, my wife, taught it to her middle schoolers the very next day, so amazed by the pictures and the message. It follows animals that move in groups. Wildebeests who move across Africa by the thousands that look like a line of ants from the sky, and yet they travel mile and mile and mile on the very same path. It shows bees the size of your finger who bundle together and can move together to shield off the largest mammal, becoming one massive unified army. It shows birds that fly in sync with each other so well, down to the very inch, that when you look up and see them in the sky, you think that must be a cloud above you, moving together as one piece. Smith explains that there are 3 simple rules that scientists have discovered that allow animals to successfully move as a swarm or as a herd. They are as follows. 1, don't get too far from your neighbor. 2, don't get too close to your neighbor. And 3, when your neighbor turns, you turn. These 3 rules, with the images of these amazing creations out in our world, easily put all of my family's mouth, all the people in my family, our mouths were open in awe of nature. And then later this week, we marked the 1-year anniversary of how dangerous a herd mentality can be among us as human beings. Our mouths were open again, as I know yours were, looking back on where we were a year ago, at a swarm, a herd, a mob mentality. On the one hand, it can be beautiful, and on the other hand, destructive. It seems that the formula that protects wild animals can become quite dangerous when applied to humans. And yet, I would argue that one of the great strengths of the Jewish people and of Judaism is the fact that we have for so long embraced a herd mentality. This week's Torah portion is the very beginning of our people's sense of being a large group moving together. And in fact, from this point forward in the Torah, that is what Torah is obsessed with. How do you take hundreds of thousands or even millions of people and make them feel and act in a way in which they are connected and see that what they can do can be holy? This week's Torah portion, the plagues end in Egypt, and we read that the Israelites begin their journey. The 600,000 men, we're told, not including women and children, are joined by a mixed multitude that went with them, of livestock, of flocks, of herds, of people from other nations. And since that moment when we were freed from slavery, we've made our core narrative the narrative of marching together. And you could say we've done 3 things. We stayed close to our neighbor throughout the generations, working to be part of each other's lives. We've worked to stay far away from our neighbor, far enough so that we're not too much a part of their lives, that we allow them enough space within our group to still be who they are, to allow for a diversity of people. Within the Jewish people, that's meant Sephardic Jews and Ashkenazi Jews and gay Jews and straight Jews and all sorts of Jewish people, all sorts of opinions, as our favorite joke says, all sorts of expressions of our faith, close enough to know each other, far enough away to give each other space. And we can say, as Ruth said to Naomi, I will go where you go, your people will be my people, that when our neighbors amongst our tribe, our herd, have turned, that we have known that we have to turn too. Not just physically, perhaps not even just morally or philosophically. Certainly in our love for Israel and our care and concern for our people and the broad strokes of life, we have been unified. But so too, when you are moving as a herd, when life turns for someone, you notice it. When something hurts the group, you turn together, as we did when we watched what happened in Pittsburgh, as we have when we watch what happens in Israel. So too, when we've had our moments of joy and excitement when an Israeli wins the gold medal in the Olympics. We turn together at the biggest moments in life, and we remain a part of this group. The people who stormed the Capitol probably could have said some of those same things. They too were close to each other. There too was a diversity among them. And they acted as a unified group. So what separates us from them? What separates a good herd from a destructive herd among the human race? I think there's a fourth rule. A rule that separates that angry mob from a people trying to be a light unto the nations. When God spoke to the Israelites and asked them to leave Egypt after 430 years of slavery, God asked the Israelites to circumcise all of their sons. One account explains that immediately all the Israelites went out and circumcised their sons on the spot. It's what Aviva Zornberg, a great Torah commentator, refers to as spontaneous obedience. But a midrash takes issue. And I think the midrash is right, because I think it knows the Jewish people. And perhaps all people. We can't practice spontaneous obedience and remain a thoughtful group of people doing good. The midrash states that the people spoke up. They said, hold on a second. You want all of us to do this right now? We don't think so. And so God created Passover, the ritual, a ritual that brought the family together. First, around a sacrifice, which was normal during that time, and later, as we know, that became our Passover Seder, a ritual that brings us together and points us in the right direction. The fourth rule is, make sure you know where the herd is going. Don't practice spontaneous obedience. Don't walk blindly. The Sfat Emet, another great Torah commentator, says that the redemption from Egypt was a freeing from Mitzrayim, which translates literally to the narrow places, into an expansiveness in which all potential is realized. When we move together, we know that we share our strengths with each other. In fact, we empower each other. Just this morning, to show you the variety of teachers that I listen to, from the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air to the 19th century Sfat Emet to the spinning instructor on the Peloton screen. The Peloton instructor said wisely, as I was losing my breath, when you get stronger, you give someone else permission to be stronger. That is a herd mentality. It means that if I move with the group, then what I do matters. Whether I intend it to impact my neighbor or not, if I get stronger, I'm showing my neighbor that they can be stronger. If I face a struggle, a loss, a weak moment for myself, I look amongst the herd and I see that others have faced that loss also. And I see that I am never alone. Next week, in our Torah, we'll celebrate the Song of the Sea, the words of Micha Mocha, our moment of collective singing and dancing for our freedom. We've had that moment over and over and over again throughout history, and we never would have had such moments if we had not relied on the person next to us and the person next to them, and on all of the people who somehow were a part of this herd with which we journey. The collective human experience made up of thousands of individuals acting as one, relying on each other. It is one of our greatest strengths. It strengthens us. It saves us at times. But as we saw, as we were reminded this week, on the one-year anniversary of January 6th, when it follows ignorance, when it doesn't know where it is going, when it is simply obedient without thought, as our Jewish history knows well, it can be destructive. And so I ask you to ask yourself, as a people who have survived by the herd mentality, are you close enough to the herds that you belong to? Are you too close at times? Are you giving the people the space they need to be themselves, to not just be like you? And do you stick with them when times are tough? Or do you turn when life turns for them, showing them that they are not alone, showing them that you see them, you are with them, that you notice the way in which their life has taken a turn? And finally, can you take a step back and notice whether we are going in the right direction? May we continue to be there for each other, to strengthen each other, to move toward the promise of the future and be a part of the herd, the community that brings us to celebrate freedom as we will next week during Shabbat Shirah. Shabbat Shalom.